I'm often asked questions about flying a North American fighter kite and how do you do it? Well, it's easy for me to tell you how, real simple. And I'm going to do it right here. And I'm assuming that you're a relatively new kite flyer, new to fighter kite flying. And based on that assumption, I'm going to start at the very beginning, just to make sure that the bases are covered in case those basics haven't yet reached you. I mean, I'm guessing many of them have, but some of them may be slightly different perspective than you've thought about before whenever you've been kite flying, whatever kind of kites you've been flying. So the question I always get is, well, how in the world can a fighter kite with only one line be controlled and maneuvered and to do all the different things it does? Well, it appears like there are many things must be involved because of all the things the kite can do. But there aren't. There are very few things involved. That's the beauty of it. It's really simple. It isn't easy to do the first time. I will tell you that. Personal experience. It's not easy at all to do the first time, especially if you have no one to help you get started when you're out flying on the flying field or on the beach, which was what my experience was. So I know firsthand that it isn't easy if you're alone in the process. But knowing a little bit about and becoming aware of some of the basic things can be useful, but there is no way you're going to learn from me in this video how to fly a fighter kite. That's impossible. You can read, I don't care how many books, I don't care how many PDF files. You can watch 200 YouTube videos from all different people flying and showing how to do it. And that's all useful, but it does not teach you how to do it. You must actually fly the kite. The kite is the only teacher. This is the thing. Many people don't get this. It takes them a little while. But the kite is the only teacher. That's it. It's simple. It tells you the truth. It does not lie. The kite does not lie. You can make all the excuses you want for why the kite isn't doing what you think it should do. But it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The only person involved that isn't doing what they're supposed to do is you. Yeah, that's it. Take accountability and responsibility for that, and you're a long way ahead of the game. So, what are the key things about flying a fighter kite? Well, one of the things that really surprised me when I started was if, let's say, I'm at the beach, I'm going to fly my kite, and the wind is relatively light, very, very light breeze. Well, I want to have my back to the wind. That's number one. But where is the wind coming from? I thought it would be simple to determine. And if the wind's blowing pretty hard, of course, it is easier. But if it's light, it's not that easy sometimes. So what I do is I put my arms out like this, at my shoulders, and I turn my body so that my back is to the wind, and the wind's blowing against my back. And I feel the maximum amount of wind on my back and on my arms, equally on my arms. And then that's how I determine where the wind is coming from. And I want my back directly into the wind. So I'm facing completely, perfectly downwind. That's number one. Number two is there are only two ways that a flyer can control a fighter kite. There are only two controls a fighter kite recognizes and responds to. That's it. No matter what the kite does, there's only two things the flyer can do to create that kite behavior. One is to increase the amount of tension on the flying line, increasing the tension on the flying line. Well, that means that it's pulling harder, I guess, if you could describe it that way, for hanging on to the flying line. And it's pulling harder, the tension is greater in the flying line. And the kite itself, when that happens, the kite is changing shape. The skin or the sail part of the kite is changing shape differently when there's more tension, more wind pushing against it. So it changes the way it responds. So that's one thing. You can increase the amount of tension. The other thing is you can decrease the amount of tension in the flying line. For example, the kite is flying, has a certain amount of tension in it, and is flying. If you let go of the flying line and allow the kite just to pull the line through your fingers, there's no tension on that flying line, or very, very little. And when that happens, the kite responds differently than it did just moments before when you were actually hanging on to the line. Those are the two things: reducing and increasing the tension. Those are the only two things the kite recognizes and responds to. Now that seems just utterly simple, and it is when you talk about it. But there are so many varying degrees of tension and easing tension, and the timing of applying more tension and releasing tension quickly, slowly, so on and so forth, that all comes into play as to making the kite maneuver in specific ways. But we're talking about the basics to get started, and hopefully in an easy beginning process. I have taught or attempted to teach many, many people over the years how to fly fighter kites. And one of the things I've noticed is that there's a tendency, I don't know if it's just an inherent quality in human beings, but I suffered from it too. I mean, it's the same thing. I know I am flying I got my kite in the air, let's say, and I'm hanging on to the flying line. And I'm pretty happy that it's up in the air and it seems to be doing okay. And then all of a sudden it starts spinning around and acting kind of weird and a little bit chaotic. And I get a little bit panicked and a little bit confused, and pretty soon the kite's aiming its nose directly to the ground. And that's where it's headed. And I know it's going to crash. So what do I do to prevent it? I grab a hold of that flying line and I pull like hell. That's what I do. That's what most beginning flyers do. They just respond that way automatically. And what that does is that accelerates the kite into the ground, creating a more violent, more damaging crash. Yeah, just the opposite of what you want. So how do you prevent it from crashing? Well, you do the opposite. Let's say your kite's flying and coming down like we just described, and it's coming down pretty darn fast. Well, If you were to let go of the flying line and just allow the kite to pull the line through your hands without any resistance on your part, just have it flow out, what will happen, no matter how close to the ground the kite is, the nose of the kite will begin to quickly begin to point away from you and begin rotating with its nose upward. And actually, the wind will continue to push it a little ways farther and farther away from you. But it didn't crash. And now the nose of the kite is pointed upward. When it does point upward, that's when you grab a hold of the line and you begin applying more tension. You pull the line, and let go of the line, drop the line on the ground, grab more, retrieve the line. Then the kite will go in the direction, it'll go straight. If you pull hard enough, you have to pull hard enough. It'll go straight in the direction the nose was pointed when you began to pull, when you began to increase the tension in the flying line. And as long as you maintain that constant tension, it will continue to fly straight in that direction. So you release the line if the kite's pointed down to a crash. Don't pull it. The next thing, the part of the kite that you want to pay attention to most is the nose of the kite. Now, on many fighter kite designs, it's really not easy to identify the nose from a wingtip or from the tail. They're all very similar in shape. So if that's the case, and you have, and in the beginning especially, you have a little challenge figuring out where the nose is on the kite when it's in the air and active and moving around, do something to identify the nose so it's clear to you. Paint it, use a marker, do something to make it clearly the nose of the kite, and you know that's the nose. And the reason that's important is that when the kite nose is aimed in a particular direction that you want the kite to fly in, when that happens, immediately as that happens, you have to increase the tension in the flying line, retrieving line, pulling the line in order to get the kite to go in that direction. Now, when you are through with that and you want the kite to change direction, you simply release a little bit of the line, reducing the tension, and the kite will stop going straight and it will begin to turn and spin. And when it spins, then it's the most important time to watch the nose. Because while it's spinning, if you see that the nose is pointed up and you begin to pull on the flying line, it'll go up. But sometimes the kites go pretty fast when they're spinning. They spin quickly. And so you see it with its nose up, but by the time you pull on the flying line, the nose is pointed down. So you have to be able to quickly pull the line when you see the kite's nose pointed in the direction that you want it to go. And when you're finished with the kite's flight in that direction, simply release the line tension just a little or a lot. Just watch what happens. And that's how you fly a fighter kite, by constantly adjusting the tension in the flying line. There is nothing else. That's all that it takes. But the timing and the degree of tension reduction or degree of tension increase, all of those things play a role. In the beginning, though, just pay attention to the nose of the kite and its direction and use that as your guide. Now, if the kite is just too fast and you just can't keep track of it and it doesn't allow you to do anything because of that, my suggestion is to get a shopping bag or some piece of plastic, thin plastic, and use a pair of scissors and cut a ribbon of that plastic, maybe 5 feet long. Tape a few pieces together if you have to, Scotch tape or whatever, doesn't matter. Tape that to the tail of the kite and create a streamer tail on the kite. And then try and fly it. That will slow the kite down. And its behavior, including its rate of spin, will slow down, allowing you more time to figure out what to do when the nose of the kite is pointed the direction you want the kite to travel. And that's when you increase the tension of the flying line. So, although this is just a discussion really about the basics of fighter kite flying, and it will not, I guarantee it, it will not allow you to go out and just by watching this and listening to it, to go out and fly a fighter kite without hesitation, without problem. If it does, wow, you are one really good kite flyer, and I admire that. But I've never seen that occur. It takes a little bit of time. It takes a few efforts. It's worth it, well worth it. But it does take a little bit of practice. And I hope that this will help you in focusing your practice in the areas that will do you the most good and most quickly get you up to speed and improving your enjoyment of fighter kite flying.